It all started a few days ago when I arrived in town with my new kitten, planning to stay at my grandparents' house. I was expecting it to be a little untidy. My brother Sam, who's 24, tends to leave his things around. But nothing could have prepared me for what I walked into. I've always had a complicated relationship with my brother. We grew up with my mom inheriting our grandparents' house when they passed away. My mom, who loved hosting family celebrations there, never sold it. Both Sam and I had full access to it, but Sam treated it more like a personal storage unit than a place that held memories of our childhood. He used it often, but he didn't care much about keeping it clean, and that deeply bothered my mom, who wanted the house to be a comfortable, welcoming place for family gatherings. But despite her concerns, my mom never took away his keys, and she always expected me to help her clean up after him, knowing full well that Sam wouldn't. When I walked into the house that day, I couldn't believe my eyes. I had brought my kitten with me and needed a safe place to leave her while I cleaned up a bit, but there was nowhere that felt clean enough. The bathroom was the only place I could trust to be safe. Everywhere else was covered in filth-rotting meat, maggots, mold, mud, and open beer cans scattered all over the place. Fishing hooks were lying on the carpet, and there was a pile of about 20 fishing rods just thrown carelessly on the floor. The smell was overwhelming, and it was honestly hard to even walk through the house without stepping on something gross. I called my mom, crying. I didn't know where else to go since the guests were staying in my room, and I had nowhere else to stay. The only options were to either clean the mess enough to make it safe for my cat or drive hours back to my apartment. I told my mom how bad it was, and she just told me to clean it up enough so the cat could be safe and throw Sam's stuff into the garage. She said we were going to have to clean it up anyway, so I might as well start now. I was angry. I didn't want to have to clean up Sam's mess again. I was already feeling upset that once again, I was the one left to deal with this when my brother wouldn't take responsibility for anything. As I cleaned, I moved Sam's pile of fishing rods to the garage, just like my mom had instructed. I didn't think much of it at the time, just that I was doing what I had to do to make the house livable. But then, earlier today, my brother came over to grab some gear for his next fishing trip. He saw that 2 of his fishing rods were broken ones that I had moved, and he started demanding that I pay him $150 to replace them. I didn't even understand how the rods had broken because he refused to show me. He was just angry, insisting that I had broken them, and demanding that I pay him for the damage. I refused. I told him that he had no right to treat the house like a trash heap, and that if he had taken care of his things instead of leaving them all over the place, this wouldn't have been an issue. I even showed him pictures of the disgusting conditions I had to clean up just to keep my cat from getting sick. The mold, the maggots, the rotting food. It was beyond disgusting. He lied to me, saying the house was already clean and that if he'd known how bad it was, he would have cleaned it up himself. But that's the problem, he never cleans up after himself. He's had a long history of leaving things to others, especially me. I told him that if he hadn't left his fishing gear lying around like he did, none of this would have happened. His response: he refused to speak to me until I paid him and called me an expletive for refusing to do so. My mom has been staying out of it, but she suggested that I just pay him so we can have a peaceful Thanksgiving. My dad is on my side, but things are still tense, and the whole situation just feels out of control. Then, as if things weren't complicated enough, Sam's girlfriend texted me, accusing me of being selfish because it would be easier for me to pay $150 than it would be for him. I responded by sending her photos of the mess I had to clean up, and she hasn't said anything since, just left me on read. I was sure of my stance at first. I didn't owe him anything, and I was tired of being expected to clean up his mess. But now, I'm not so sure. Everyone keeps telling me to just pay him and avoid conflict, but I feel like that's just letting him off the hook again. I'm stuck. Part of me feels guilty for not paying him to make everything easier, but the other part of me is furious at how he treats our family and our grandparents' house. I need some outside perspective on this because I honestly don't know what to do anymore. Should I just pay him to avoid conflict? Or do I stand my ground and refuse to be his doormat? After the argument with my brother about the fishing rods, I couldn't stop thinking about the mess he had left behind in my grandparents' house. It wasn't just about the broken rods. or the $150 she was demanding from me. It was about the years of him trashing the place without any consequences. Knowing that my mom and I would always clean it up for him, I kept replaying everything in my head, feeling trapped in a cycle of cleaning up after him and being the one expected to shoulder the emotional burden. But things had escalated this time, and I felt like I was running out of options. Sam had made it clear that he wasn't going to speak to me unless I paid him. That hurt because I've always tried to be there for him. Even when he treated me like garbage, I had hoped that, as adults, we'd be able to talk things through like mature people. But no, he went straight for the financial threat, trying to guilt me into paying for something that was his fault in the first place. What really struck me was how easily he could dismiss everything else that happened: the mold, the maggots, the rotting food. He just wanted the money, as if the condition of the house and the emotional toll it had taken on me didn't matter at all. The next day, things didn't get any better. I went back to the house to do more cleaning. It still wasn't safe enough for my cat to roam freely, and I knew that if I didn't deal with it now, I'd be spending the entire holiday weekend in a disgusting place. As I worked, I kept trying to figure out what had gone wrong. How had it gotten so bad this time? Sam had always left his things around. Sure, but this was a new level of neglect. He'd even gone so far as to leave things like rotten meat and trash in places that could have been harmful to anyone who was there. How could he not see how much of a mess he was making? I wanted to scream at him, but I knew it wouldn't get me anywhere. While I was cleaning, my mom called me. She had heard about the argument with Sam, and she was trying to stay out of it. I could tell she was torn. On one hand, she didn't want to get involved in the conflict between Sam and me, but on the other, she was also stressing out about the state of the house. She said she was already feeling overwhelmed with preparing for Thanksgiving, and she didn't want to add more tension to the situation. Her solution: just pay Sam the money. It was, in her words, easier than dealing with the stress of another fight. She said we could all just get along for the holidays if I gave him what he wanted. I was so frustrated. It was typical of my mom to expect me to just go along with things for the sake of peace, even when it meant enabling Sam's behavior. It was like she didn't want to confront the reality that he was the problem here, and not me. I felt like I was constantly being asked to swallow my anger and frustration for the sake of family harmony. But I wasn't willing to just give in this time. It was the last straw. I had spent so many years cleaning up after Sam, dealing with his messes, and ignoring the way he treated me and everyone else in the family. I wasn't going to let him continue to take advantage of me. When I hung up the phone with my mom, I felt even more conflicted. I loved her, and I understood how stressful things were for her, but I couldn't keep playing the role of the responsible one while Sam got away with everything. I had already spent hours cleaning up after him, and now she wanted me to pay him $150 for rods that were his responsibility to take care of in the first place. It didn't sit right with me. Later that day, Sam came over again, this time to try and get me to pay him the money for the broken rods. He was still angry, and when I refused, he got even more upset. He called me selfish and said that I was being unreasonable. He went on and on about how he couldn't afford to replace the rods and how he needed me to help him out. To be honest, I didn't even care about the rods at this point. It wasn't about the fishing gear, it was about the principle. It was about the fact that he was never held accountable for his actions, and I was always the one cleaning up his messes. At some point, his girlfriend texted me, telling me that it was easier for me to afford the $150 than it was for Sam. She accused me of being selfish, and it just made me even angrier. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just didn't think it was fair for me to pay for something I didn't break. But more than that, I didn't think it was fair for my mom to keep expecting me to do everything for Sam when he was perfectly capable of taking care of himself. The whole thing felt like a game to him. He would break something, make a mess, and then expect everyone to clean it up and pay for the consequences. I didn't respond to her text, but I did send her pictures of the mess I had to clean up, just to show her how bad it really was. I figured that would at least make her realize that I wasn't overreacting, but she didn't respond, and I ended up getting left on read. It felt like everyone was ignoring me or telling me I was wrong, even though I was the one who had to deal with the aftermath of Sam's irresponsibility. As the day went on, I started to feel more and more isolated. I didn't want to fight with my family, but it felt like I had no other choice. I had already been put in this position so many times before, and I was exhausted. I started questioning whether I was being too stubborn or if I was justified in refusing to pay Sam. It was hard to know what the right decision was. I wanted to stand my ground, but I also didn't want to cause more drama than I already had. I spent the next few hours cleaning up more of the house, making sure my cat was safe, and trying to keep my mind off of the mess I was in. It wasn't just about the house, it was about the bigger picture. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly cleaning up after my brother and pretending everything was fine. I needed to figure out a way to break this cycle, but I wasn't sure how. For now, though, I just focused on getting through the day. There were still a few more days before Thanksgiving, and I had to figure out what to do next. I knew that no matter what happened, the situation with Sam wasn't over yet. I had to keep fighting for myself and for my own peace of mind. But in the back of my mind, I wondered if this would be the last time I would ever be able to stand up to him. The days following the argument with Sam were tense and filled with uncertainty. I had spent hours cleaning up the house, but there was still so much work left to do. The state of the house was appalling, and even though I was doing my best to make it livable again, I couldn't shake the feeling of frustration and resentment building inside me. I felt like I was stuck in this never-ending cycle of being the one to pick up the pieces, while Sam just continued to get away with it all. The more I thought about the situation, the more I realized how deeply it ran. It wasn't just about cleaning up after Sam or paying him $150 for broken fishing rods. It was about the larger pattern of behavior that had been going on for years. My parents, especially my mom, had been enabling him for so long. They'd cleaned up after him, covered for him, and allowed him to escape the consequences of his actions. And I, being the responsible one, had always been dragged into it. I was expected to help clean up his messes, whether it was literally cleaning the house or doing his homework when we were younger. It had always been easier for everyone to rely on me than to hold Sam accountable. I tried to talk to my mom about this, but it didn't go the way I hoped. I explained how tired I was of always being the one to clean up Sam's mess, to always be the one who had to deal with the fallout from his behavior. But she didn't seem to understand. She told me that she just wanted everything to be okay for Thanksgiving, and that it was easier for me to pay Sam the money than to deal with the conflict. She acknowledged that Sam had a lot of problems, but she was still unwilling to really confront them. She didn't want to lose him, I think, and that meant she was willing to let him continue to get away with everything. I was frustrated and hurt. I wanted to scream at her, but I didn't. Instead, I just took a deep breath and tried to keep my cool. I knew that if I pushed too hard, it would only make things worse. But I couldn't let this go. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. And as much as I loved my family, I knew that if things didn't change, I was going to have to distance myself from all of them. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own peace of mind for the sake of everyone else's comfort. A few days later, Sam came over again, still angry about the fishing rods. He demanded that I pay him immediately, and when I refused, he became even more hostile. He called me a expletive again and told me that I was being unreasonable. I stood my ground, but it was exhausting. I didn't want to fight with him anymore, but I couldn't just let him walk all over me either. The situation took another turn when Sam's girlfriend texted me again. This time, she was even more insistent, accusing me of being selfish and telling me that I had the money and that I should just pay him so everyone could move on. I was so tired of being told that I was the problem, so tired of being blamed for things that weren't my fault. I responded with a message that included the photos I'd taken of the mess I had to clean up, hoping that she would see how ridiculous it was for Sam to expect me to pay him. But she didn't respond. She just left me on read again, and that was the final straw for me. I realized that no matter how much I tried to explain myself or show them how wrong they were, nothing was going to change unless I stood up for myself. No one was going to respect my boundaries unless I set them firmly and consistently. But it was hard. I loved my family, and I didn't want to make things worse. But I also knew that I couldn't keep sacrificing my own well-being for their convenience. Around this time, my mom came over to the house to check on the progress of the cleaning. When she saw the state of things, She started crying. I hadn't mentioned it before, but my mom co-owns the house with my aunt, who lives on the other side of the state. My aunt has always been a little more vocal about the house's condition, and if she ever found out how badly Sam had trashed it, she would flip out. My mom knew this, and I could see the stress weighing heavily on her. She didn't want to disappoint my aunt, but at the same time, she didn't want to confront Sam about his behavior. It was a tough position for her to be in, but that didn't make it any easier for me. My mom didn't say much when she saw the house. She was just overwhelmed. She told me she was stressed about all the work she had to do to get everything ready for Thanksgiving. Then, she just shut down and started cleaning, not saying another word to me. I tried to talk to her, but she just ignored me, lost in her own thoughts as she scrambled to make everything look presentable. It felt like we were in this strange limbo, both of us trying to hold it together, but neither of us really addressing the root of the problem. The whole situation was starting to feel like a never-ending loop of frustration. My mom was so stressed out about the holidays that she couldn't see how much damage Sam had done, and I was stuck in this place where I couldn't make her understand. It was like I was invisible, just a bystander in my own life, cleaning up messes I didn't make and trying to hold my family together when it felt like everything was falling apart. At this point, I wasn't sure what to do next. I knew I had to take a step back and stop trying to fix everything for everyone, but the pressure was suffocating. My aunt would eventually find out about the state of the house, and when she did, I wasn't sure how my mom would handle it. The fear of my aunt's reaction was one more thing weighing on my mom, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. I decided to take a break from everything for a while. I needed to think things through and figure out what my next move would be. I couldn't keep going like this, constantly cleaning up after everyone and sacrificing my own peace for the sake of family harmony. But I also didn't want to make things worse. I just didn't know what the right thing to do was anymore. All I knew was that something had to change. So, I focused on my cat and tried to keep my mind off the mess. I spent some time in the bathroom with her, the only place I felt safe from the chaos around me. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing I could do to keep myself grounded in that moment. I had to keep reminding myself that I couldn't fix everything, and that was okay. But deep down, I knew that unless something changed, I would eventually have to make some tough decisions about my relationship with my family, and especially with Sam. I wasn't sure how long I could keep pretending everything was fine, but for now, all I could do was wait and see what happened next. The days after Thanksgiving were some of the toughest for me. Things didn't immediately resolve, and in many ways, it felt like the tension between my family and me had reached an all-time high. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of anxiety and frustration, trying to figure out what to do next. The situation with Sam and the mess at my grandparents' house had become something I couldn't ignore any longer. I had to make a decision about what I was going to do with the weight of it all hanging over me. As expected, my mom and I had another conversation about Sam. She tried to explain to me that Sam had a lot going on in his life, and that his struggles weren't just about alcohol and fishing rods. She mentioned that he was going through a rough time mentally, something I already knew deep down. But hearing her say it out loud made everything feel more complicated. It was hard for me to see my mom continue to make excuses for him, but at the same time, I could also understand why she did it. Sam had always been her baby, the one she tried to protect, even at the expense of everyone else in the family. I tried to explain to my mom how exhausted I was from constantly picking up after Sam, from dealing with his behavior and the chaos he brought into our lives. I told her that I couldn't keep cleaning up his messes, that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I was tired of always being the responsible one, the one who had to hold everything together while Sam just did whatever he wanted, without facing any consequences. But my mom didn't take it the way I hoped. She seemed to feel guilty and said she understood, but she also made it clear that she didn't want to lose Sam. She still believed that if she kept helping him, eventually he would change. Even though I was starting to lose faith in that idea, it was becoming increasingly clear to me that my mom wasn't ready to confront the full extent of Sam's problems. And that's when I started to realize that if I was ever going to get out of this toxic cycle, I would have to make a break for it. I couldn't keep playing this role of the dutiful daughter who cleans up after everyone and never gets anything in return. I couldn't keep letting my family treat me like I was invisible or disposable. I was angry, and I had every right to be. But what was I supposed to do now? The next significant event came a few days after Thanksgiving when my aunt called me. She was concerned about the state of the house and wanted to talk about what had happened. I knew this conversation was coming, and I wasn't sure how I was going to handle it. My aunt and mom had always been at odds when it came to the house, and I could tell that my aunt was upset with Sam, even if she didn't want to say it outright. She had heard about how Sam had trashed the place, and she was not happy. When we spoke, my aunt was firm but not unreasonable. She made it clear that she didn't want to deal with the house being in disrepair any longer, especially if it meant dealing with Sam's behavior. She said that she was tired of cleaning up after him, and that she didn't want to be part of a family that enabled him anymore. It was a tough conversation, but I appreciated that she didn't sugarcoat things. She also suggested that maybe it was time for my mom to stop letting Sam use the house so freely, and that if he couldn't respect it, then he should lose his access to it. I agreed with her, but I knew that my mom wouldn't be ready to hear that just yet. She had been so protective of Sam for so long, and I wasn't sure she would ever be able to take that step. While all of this was going on, my mom had continued to avoid confronting Sam. She kept trying to keep the peace, even though everything around her was falling apart. She was caught between wanting to protect him and the reality that he was becoming more and more difficult to manage. One evening, after a particularly difficult conversation with her, I decided to take a stand. I told my mom that I was going to take some time away from the family. I needed space to clear my head, and I needed to stop putting myself in situations where I felt like I had no voice. I told her that I couldn't keep enabling Sam, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my own well-being just to keep the family together. I wasn't sure how she was going to take it, but I knew it was the right decision for me. I think my mom was shocked by my decision. She didn't respond right away, but the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She was hurt, but deep down, I knew she understood. She just didn't know what to do about it. For the first time, I was speaking up for myself, and it felt both terrifying and empowering. A few days later, Sam called me. He wanted to talk. I was hesitant at first, but I agreed. When we spoke, he apologized, sort of. He admitted that he had been going through a rough time and that he hadn't been handling things well. He said he was sorry for breaking the rods and for making everything harder for me, but it didn't feel like a real apology. It felt more like a half-hearted attempt to smooth things over. He was still demanding the money, but this time, it didn't feel like he was truly remorseful. It felt like he was just trying to get me to pay, so he could move on without facing the real consequences of his actions. I told him that I wasn't going to give him the $150. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore, and I wasn't going to let him off the hook just because he said sorry. He was responsible for his own actions, and it was time for him to start facing the reality of his behavior. He didn't take it well, but I stood my ground. This was a turning point for me. I had finally decided that I wasn't going to let him dictate my life any longer. After that, things were quiet for a while. Sam didn't speak to me, and I didn't reach out to him. I focused on my own life, my cat, and just trying to get through the holidays. It wasn't easy, but I was starting to feel a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't part of the chaos anymore, and for once, I was able to take care of myself. The situation with Sam was still unresolved, but I felt like I had taken a step in the right direction. I was no longer willing to play the role of the peacekeeper or the one who cleaned up after everyone. It was time for Sam to face the consequences of his actions, and it was time for me to take control of my own life. In the end, I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but I was determined to move forward, no matter how messy things got. I had my boundaries, and I wasn't going to let anyone cross them again, whether Sam chose to change or not. I had to make sure that I didn't lose myself in the process. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally taking care of myself.